Talk about a perfect delivery. In the commercial break, I go in the back. Liz Whaled, the co-executive producer of The Rich Eisen Show, hands me, just freshly delivered, a box of 8 beer. And here's a can to prove it right here in front of me.
All right.
And joining us here on The Rich Eisen Show is the man who created this brew, which is, I'm more of a wine drinker than a beer drinker, but I drink this beer, and I'm not just saying it because he's on the phone line. It is outstanding. And I guess to talk about the new number 8 in the National Football League, Aaron Rodgers, is in fact Troy Aikman here on the Rich Eisen Show. How you doing, Troy?
Hey, I'm doing well. The old number 8 going to talk about the new number 8 and talk a little 8 beer. So,
there you go.
Good stuff.
This is, if this was Sesame Street, this would be sponsored by the number 8. Aaron Rodgers wearing number 8 because he wore that in college. Troy, unless are you working a deal with Aaron? I don't know. There you go. That might work.
Yeah, I wish. Smart on his part. I saw where Joe Namath said that he would be fine if they unretired the number, and I don't know. I know Jets fans are elated right now, as you are as well. I saw your post yesterday about the trade finally occurring. It'll be great for the Jets, but I think it was a smart move by Aaron sticking with number 8.
Well, I mean, how do you think this can work out? There is obviously so many question marks when you go from one spot to another, which is a sensation you never really had to go through. But what do you think about the setup, the whole concept, everything all put together, Aaron Rodgers with the Jets and how it might fare? Troy?
Well, I think that, first of all, a lot of people look at the trade yesterday and then try to evaluate it and say, okay, who got the better deal? How does this look? And I never think those trades can you truly evaluate at the time that they take place. I think you have to wait and see exactly what happens. If Aaron Rodgers goes out and plays like the 4-time MVP that he's been, and then leads the Jets to the Super Bowl, like Tom Brady did in Tampa, it doesn't matter what they gave up. It would be a huge win, of course, then for the Jets. We saw the commitment then, of course, that the Rams have made over the years with their number 1 picks. But I expect that it'll work out well. I anticipate that Aaron will play well. There's familiarity for him, and I think that's the real key. It's different, and although I never went through it, I entertained the idea. But to go from a place where he spent all this time, and it's very comfortable for him, and then to go someplace different, he's now much like Russell Wilson last year and the others who have come before him that have made that transition as great players. You now have to prove yourself all over again. Because those people in the locker room, the organization, they've seen it, but they want to see it up close. And so there is some pressure that comes with that. But I think it'll be a great trade. I expect him to play great. I like the Jets. I like what they've done defensively. It seems like whenever you say this is the missing piece, the story doesn't end so well, but I expect the Jets to be really good next year.
And I'm with you about evaluating trades, Troy. Perfect example, trade between the Rams and the Lions for Matthew Stafford. At first blush, when it happened, it's like, wow, all those number 1 overall picks for Stafford, and who knows what he can do in Los Angeles. And you look at the trade right now, and the Lions are 6th on the clock because the Rams had such a terrible season last year with the injury front. And you're like, boy, the Rams could use that draft choice. And that's how you evaluate that there. But evaluating it on the night of Super Bowl 56, it's like, great trade, right? I mean,
no, for sure.
That.
And like I said, I touched on the Rams just because of how they've dealt so many first-round picks over the years, as we all know, in order to bring in proven veteran star players. And that was, of course, to win the Super Bowl, and now they're paying for that a little bit. But I've talked to a number of coaches. It's interesting, Rich. You pose the question of, would you rather be relevant, like knocking on the door, getting to the championship game, whether it's AFC, NFC, maybe an occasional Super Bowl appearance. You don't quite win the Super Bowl, but you're always there, and you're always winning 11, 12 games a season, and you're relevant. Or would you just rather win the Super Bowl and then just have these poor seasons the other 9 years?
Mm-hmm.
And to a man, they say they'd take the Super Bowl. So, that's what follows you on your resume. Once you've done it, then they can't take it away from you. And I think it then nobody really cares. And I wonder what the fan base would say to that. I mean, I've learned that the organizations and coaches and general managers, they lean towards, yeah, we'd have the one great year and win the Super Bowl. I wonder how the fans would feel about that. Everybody wants to win the Super Bowl, but at the expense of not being relevant for the other, part of the decade, it'd be an interesting poll.
Well, the only rational thing we can do after hearing that is put it on Twitter. That's the only rational thing we can do, right, Chris? So
hey, that's rational.
Pop that on Twitter for a poll, and we'll use it as an indicative of the larger picture. One last thing for you on this, Troy, is nothing is more insightful, certainly when two Hall of Fame quarterbacks talk to each other, one who's already there and another one who's going there. I've seen that in broadcast meetings myself involving Kurt Warner and a quarterback who's getting ready to play a game that they're broadcasting. I'm wondering, is there any insight you could share, Troy, conversations with Rodgers last year that indicate how he might view this as a fresh start, or is this one last role for him, do you think, in 2023? Troy.
Well, I would say this. First of all, it's a fair question, and the conversations that I've had, whether it be with guys like Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, Drew Brees when he was playing, Brett Favre, there's a number of those guys. There is obviously a level of respect, and so those conversations, much like what you've heard with Kurt Warner and the quarterbacks he's talked to, it's good. I think there is a brotherhood and a fraternity, if you will, amongst quarterbacks. With that said, although I do consider Aaron a friend and someone who I think a lot of and have great respect for, he plays it pretty close to the vest, and he doesn't share a lot. And he's usually, whatever he reveals, I think he goes in knowing exactly how much he's going to reveal or what he's going to give of himself or what he wants the message to be. But as far as what happened in Green Bay or why he maybe felt that it was time to go somewhere else, or all that has been reported and discussed ad nauseum, I really could not comment on. I think change is good. I mean, we all go through that. I went through it on a much different level, of course, last year going to ESPN, and I think that when you've been doing it for a long time in one place, sometimes going somewhere else and seeing how they do it does kind of re-energize you. And I know that he had talked about retirement. There's been a lot of conversation about that. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it means that he's less motivated to go out and play great. In fact, I think now that the trade has happened and he is going to be in New York and playing, I think that he's more committed than ever to prove that he's, the best quarterback in the game today and one of the best to have ever done it. And
they also have the horses, I think. I mean, they really do have those kids and Quinnen Williams in the middle of that defense as well. I mean, he basically wore Quinnen Williams all four quarters when the Jets visited Green Bay last year. I mean, but the reason why I ask that is that does change the evaluation if he does play more than just a year or even two. Like, obviously that's rare to do into your 40s, but he seems tremendously in shape. That seems to be. Yeah, I think he can play several more years if that's what he chooses to do. Right. I asked him years ago. I said this was Brady was maybe 40 at the time or 41, 42, whatever it was, and was talking to Aaron, and I said, for some reason I just don't see you playing until you're 45 years old. And he didn't comment. He just kind of had that smile that we've seen so many times, And so I do think there's probably a feeling on his part. Maybe if they win the Super Bowl, maybe you say, hey, what a great way to go out. But I do think there's a feeling on his part that the trade was made and he wants to give all that he has. So part of me, although I don't have any insight, part of me would be surprised if he only plays the one season. But I liken it a lot, this situation, and it's a bit unfair, to when Tom went to Tampa Bay. But Tampa Bay wound up putting more pieces around him in addition to what they had. The Jets have done similar things, but the defense for the Bucs were a good defense. And I think the Jets are a really solid defense and get after people as well. So as a quarterback, you come in and you have that part of it. That makes that opportunity look a whole lot better. When you don't feel like you're going to be in these shootouts week in and week out, you got a chance to kind of ease your way into it, even though expectations will be high offensively. And I do think they'll be really good on offense. Hard not to be when you have him as your quarterback.
But I think there's a lot of things in place. And when Robert Saleh got to the Jets, and I watched him in a preseason game, I thought right away, I said, wow, this is a defense. They fly around, much like what we saw when he was coaching the 49ers. And I said, this defense is going to be really good in a short period of time, and I think we've seen that.
I've got a can of 8 beer in front of me and number 8 on the phone from ESPN Monday Night Football, Pro Football Hall of Famer, 3-time champion Troy Aikman here on the Rich Eisen Show. Do you have an opinion on any of the quarterbacks up for being drafted on Thursday night, Troy?
Here's the hard part, Rich, is that I watch these workouts, and if you can't look like a first-round pick in shorts throwing a football with no one rushing you, then there shouldn't be a conversation. I mean, I don't know how you evaluate a quarterback watching a workout, quite honestly. You see the ball. I think arm strength is often overrated. I've heard people say, hey, this guy can make all the throws. I still don't know what that means, because what throw cannot a quarterback make? I mean, I want to hear, rather than he can make all the throws, I want to hear someone say this quarterback cannot make this throw. There's only 32 of these jobs, and if you can't make the throws, then you shouldn't be talked about in the first round either, and you're not going to play. And so what, in my opinion, defines whether or not a guy is going to be effective. First of all, you got to have good players around you. So if you go to an organization like we were talking about just now with Aaron, if you go to a team that has good things around you, like we saw with Brock Purdy going to the 49ers, you have a chance to play well and play well early. I was a much better quarterback when we had more talent than I was early in my career when we didn't have much. So it does take some time, but it's of the things you can control. Mm-hmm. All of the measurables, those are the easy things. I mean, that doesn't define how great a player is going to be. Tom Brady is a classic example of that. What, in my opinion, defines it is, does he make good decisions under pressure? Does he want to be great? Is he a good leader? Can he get along with his teammates? Is he going to be the first guy in the building, the last guy to leave? All of those things, and none of that, you can't measure any of that. So, and it's sometimes hard. I think oftentimes you can sit and talk to somebody. There's no foolproof way, and that's why, it's a flip of a coin as to whether or not a first-round pick is going to be successful. But I think you have to be in the room and talk to a lot of people and really get to know the person as to whether or not then do you like the guy. Now, me just looking at these players and saying, okay, well, I see this, I see that. I look at Bryce Young, and he's played against top talent. He's played well. And the height thing I know has been talked about, or his size, and I don't think that's as big of a factor. The game has changed. It's played differently than it was. And then you tend to think, hey, I've heard he's a great guy. I've heard all the things that I just said. Mm-hmm. I've heard he has and he possesses. You say, okay, he's done it at a high level where he's been. You'd probably bet that he's going to play at a high level, then in the NFL. But I heard somebody say that at number 2, Houston has to take a quarterback and because they're in desperate need of one. And I say, if they don't like the quarterbacks, then you don't take a quarterback. I don't think you take a quarterback just because you need a quarterback if you don't think the guy can play. And then that becomes the evaluation process. And the last part of this is this, Rich, that I've been saying this a long time. Every year there is a top quarterback in the NFL. But that doesn't mean that every year there's a franchise quarterback in the draft, So you have to I don't know if every year there's a top quarterback in the draft. That doesn't mean that every year there's a franchise quarterback in the draft every year. But every team, as we know, that is starved for a quarterback, you tend to get a little over anxious, and you feel like I think sometimes you talk yourself into it and say, this guy's the future for us. And we've all seen so many of the quarterbacks that haven't had the success. Is that all on them? No, it's not. Like I said, a lot of times it's on the organizations as well.
In the few minutes I have left with you, Troy, let's talk about your drafting. 34 years ago, I saw your post as well. 34 years ago, you were Jerry Jones's first draft choice, weren't you? Right?
I was.
What was that?
It was interesting when I came out because my senior year at UCLA, I played in the Cotton Bowl here in Dallas. And so Tom Landry and Tex Schramm, they were at every practice. Gil Brandt was at every practice. So that was the old guard, as you know.
Yeah.
And then after that game, about a month later, Jerry Jones buys the Cowboys. And now all of a sudden, Gil was still involved, but yet he was kind of taking a secondary role to some regards. And then I'm getting to know Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson, who I've known Jimmy since I was 14 when I went to his football camp. He was recruiting me at Oklahoma State. And then I was drafted, number 1 overall. And it's crazy that it was 34 years ago. I'm thinking, man, I don't know where the years have gone. But yeah, it's something I'm very proud of. I'm proud to have been the number 1 overall pick. But I'm also proud to have been Jerry Jones's very first draft pick. That means a lot to me.
So there were no cell phones. Did he get on the phone to you, like in the green room, a landline in the green room or something like that, Troy?
No, great question, Rich.
Thank you.
Yeah, really great question. It was different then, as everything was.
Yes.
But back then, you only were in New York. The draft, of course, was in New York. You were only in New York if you were the number 1 overall pick and you were already signed. And so I signed 2 days before that draft.
Yeah.
I flew to New York. I was in New York. I was there. Stephen Jones and Charlotte Jones flew with me and my agent, Lee Steinberg.
Yeah.
We saw Phantom of the Opera the night before the draft. I walked out. That's the other part of the draft that means a lot to me was Pete Rozelle.
Yes.
That was his last year to preside over the NFL draft. He only did it for the first round, of course. And so I came out, first overall pick, took my picture with Pete Rozelle. And then Paul Tagliabue took over right after that as the commissioner of the league. So a different time. Now you've got, 30 players or however many it is that are in the green room, as you well know. Much different. Was
there any stickiness to the negotiation with Jerry? I mean, that's his first NFL negotiation was with you too.
Yeah, it
right?
was. And I will say this, that Lee Steinberg, who, the best there is and had negotiated a lot of big contracts, he marveled at how smart Jerry Jones was, and then a guy named Mike McCoy, who was also involved in the negotiations. For a guy who had never done an NFL contract, I mean, they were really smart. They've proven how smart they are. Of course, there's a reason why they were able to buy the Cowboys. Jerry Jones was. But yeah, at one time when I was asking Jerry, even then, before he had ever been the owner of a team for one game, was telling Steinberg that I should be willing to play for half the amount I would play for anywhere else because I was going to get to play for the Dallas Cowboys.
Come on.
He was selling the Cowboys, and he threatened, if I didn't lower my asking price, he threatened that he was going to draft Tony Mandrich, the offensive tackle, who became a good friend of mine during the draft process.
Sure.
But then, that draft in itself was a great class, and proud to have been a part of that as well.
So you were not only Jones's first draft choice, you were his first NFL negotiation and his first threat as well towards a player.
And his first
in the NFL.
His first what? What was the last part?
Threatened you.
Oh, yeah.
You were the receiving. You were the receiving end of his first threat as an NFL owner as well.
For some reason, I'm not going to guarantee I was his first threat. The others, I would say yes, you're right. But
that's funny. That's funny. So tell me about the beer. How can people get your beer, Troy? Because it is awesome.
Well, you got to be in Texas. We're still only distributing in Texas. But
okay.
You can go to 8beer, EIGHT, 8beer.com, and type in your zip code. It'll tell you exactly where you can pick it up. But it's gone fantastic. We're in year 2, 90 calories, 2.6. It's the healthiest. I say healthiest. It's the cleanest beer on the market. So if you like light beer and you like the taste, I don't know why you'd drink anything else. By
the way, I love it. It's elite light lager. You're an elite quarterback making elite light lager. I love the use of elite with the number 8. And again, the can is awesome. The box is great. The packaging is awesome. And I appreciate the time always. I do not take it for granted. Thanks, Troy. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Rich. Thanks so much.
You bet. That's Troy Aikman, Pro Football Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he is.
Tony Mandrich wouldn't have worked out, I'll be honest, as well.
I love Troy Aikman. I'm just going to say it.
You got 0 rings if you take Tony Mandrich.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.